Welcome to Question Entertainment. I'm Christopher Willett.
And I'm Abby Rooney, and today we're talking about Fireproof.
Fireproof is the follow-up to Facing the Giants. In this film, Kirk plays a fire chief who is having horrible marital problems at home. In the first few minutes, we go from hearing his wife as a child discussing the perfect man she wants to marry to watching her be screamed at for the first time by her husband. As she starts discussing divorce, he gets ready to just let it happen and be able to move on. His father challenges him to give it 40 days and sends him a handwritten book called The Love Dare, where he's supposed to do a different nice thing for his wife every day and add to it as he goes. Through this, he starts to try to change himself as well as his wife. How was it?
I was actually very surprised when I saw this movie, pleasantly surprised, because I was not originally going to go see it. I was going to rent this later on just out of curiosity because Kirk is in it, kind of like I did with the Left Behind series, which were a huge disappointment. But this was so much better than I ever expected. The interactions between the husband and wife, Caleb, Catherine, were dead on.
I enjoyed this movie and didn't expect to. Most Christian films are so interested in making their point that they forget to make a movie. This, like Facing the Giants, was a well-done film that made no secret about the fact that it was trying to teach you something, but still had a film and still had characters acting in a way that was natural. The situations brought out the message as opposed to, okay, now we have to stop to tell you this point, which a lot of other Christian films come into. You see a fireman go in and rescue a little girl, and it's very impressive and very tense.
And nothing about it seems low budget.
No.
Like there was two very intense scenes that you weren't like, oh, low budget movie.
And you didn't know what was going to happen. That was the other great thing. I, in both scenes, did not know who was going to live and who was going to die, and it seemed very probable either way. The down point was not all the actors were of the highest caliber. Caleb's mother was much better towards the end of the film when they stopped allowing her to talk. And as far as Caleb's wife, I really liked her, though the whole thing I just thought she's trying to be Lauren Graham. From her outfits to her hair to her delivery. With the exception of the Gilmore Girls, she did better than Lauren Graham ever did. I do think the best actors in this film were the assistant firefighter and the neighbor.
I loved the scenes with the neighbor. No, those scenes were not the cheesy comic relief scenes. Those actually really were.
They were legitimately
funny. They were clever.
This is my question for you. Obviously, I watched this from a male perspective, but as a woman, when he started doing nice things for her, how realistic did you think it was that he was so rejected with his nice gestures?
I thought about that too, because she does seem awfully harsh in the movie. However, I know that sometimes when you've made up something in your mind, and you don't want it to be changed. She wanted out, so she didn't want to be convinced otherwise.
Okay. And she did have that group of women at work sort of egging her on to leave her jerky husband, and she did have the sweet doctor.
Yeah. And this movie, again, did a great job in showing how most affairs get started.
Yes.
And a lot of them happen in the workplace. And the scene with her out with her girlfriends.
Yes.
And that was another one that seemed very stereotypical, but very accurate.
What? I've never been hanging out with a group of entirely women, so I don't have to take your word for it.
And it's also interesting, too, because how they act like her buddies, and they give her all this advice, and they tell her, you know, you're right and he's wrong and everything, but later on in the movie it shows that they're not the greatest friends. She gets counsel from someone who is older and wiser and truly cares about her.
Who would that be?
In the cafeteria.
Oh, yeah. See, I thought the cafeteria scene was almost useless. The cafeteria scene was the one time where I felt like you wanted to make this point and give us this lesson, so you threw this scene in.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious.
We saw her once before look at her.
Yeah.
And she had to say grace before her food so we could identify, attention all, here's the Christian character.
Christian, yes.
We had the woman in the cafeteria spell it out, though I think it was shown in the story enough that we didn't need it spelled out. was that the kind of man that would go after a married woman is not the kind of man you want.
Right. That's why I felt like that scene was good. They probably could have done it a little bit differently.
Well,
but
later on
that's
when
what they accomplish. Yeah, they did
you
that.
find out that the doctor is also married.
Find out what kind of a man he is.
Yes. But the thing about this movie was, I didn't know what was going to happen. There were a lot of shocks. At one point, he writes her a note, and her response to it blew me away. As an entertaining lesson, this movie is excellent.
Is this movie good for kids?
This movie has no cuss words and no offensive dialogue. It does have life-threatening scenes, and it does deal with very adult issues. Caleb, as a husband, is not only struggling with wasting time on the internet, he's struggling with pornography. We do see him yell at his wife and feel like he's going to hit her. I wondered if that scene would end with cuss words or violence. It didn't, but he's very aggressive towards her. So where things are all handled very well through the film, there are issues that your child may not be ready to broach. And that's where I would caution parents.
The subject matter is very grown up and might be above most kids' level. I would say teenagers and up.
What about spiritual issues?
Well, the spiritual issues were quite obvious. This movie was made by a Christian production company, and it did have a purpose. But I think that using marriage to teach the gospel message was brilliant.
Yes.
Because the relationship between a husband and wife is modeled directly after the relationship between Christ and the church. So what better way to show the gospel message than showing the relationship between a husband and a wife?
This movie does give you spiritual lessons, and I found them all to be accurate and applicable, and you would be a better husband and a better Christian for following the advice in this film.
What's your recommendation?
I think you need to see this movie. This movie is well worth watching. Please see it in the theaters to support well-done Christian film. I would try to get your teenagers to watch this movie because it's one of the few realistic depictions of marriage and what it takes to be married, because most Hollywood movies, it's, I love you, you're hot, I feel so excited, let's get married and it will work. This shows marriage realistically as work, and it shows failed marriages and even good people failing. It isn't the greatest film ever made, but it's not embarrassing. It is a decent film, and it's done at a level that's worthy of its message. My only request would be, when you go and this movie ignites a new spark in your marriage, the first date you have with your wife, rent Unbreakable. Okay. Unbreakable. It doesn't give you all the tips, but it deals with marriage, and it's a much better film. Okay, what's your recommendation?
This movie might be hard to see at the theaters. It's not playing in a whole lot of places, but I know that it will probably be available on DVD relatively quickly in a lot of places. And this would actually be a good movie to buy, because I think it would be a good one to loan out to friends.
While it's in theaters, if you know another couple, invite them along to come see it. Once it comes out on DVD, don't just loan it out, invite them over. Watch it together.
Talk about it.
Yeah, because I must say, what do you think of the movie is a much less scary question than, is your marriage okay? Or, would you like to receive Jesus now?
Thanks for watching.
On YouTube, please click subscribe. On our blog, please click the RSS feed.
Yeah.
Though its first day out, it made more money than Eagle Eye. Eagle Eye trampled it by the end of the weekend, but the very first day.
It's probably because all the Christians got together and said, let's go opening night.
Yes, that was what happened.
Yeah.
And it showed it could make money, and it's been in the top 10. Like, this movie is making money, as did Facing the Giants. And Facing the Giants actually even showed up in sports movie parodies.
Oh,
the movie The
interesting.
Comebacks was semi-based on Facing the Giants.